James Charles Morris, welcome to Inside the Pulse.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I recently saw a post on your Instagram that you have an upcoming exhibition. You're curating the exhibition with several Detroit artists called Living Frequency. It's going to open in early February, right?
Yes, correct. February 8th at Gallery Camille. It'll actually be up for the entire month of February, and it's going to be a group exhibition that pays tribute to the Detroit's Black creative culture through the eyes of Detroit's new vanguard of artists.
Can you name some of the artists that are going to be in that exhibition?
Of course, Ijana Cortez, Jonathan Kimball, Oshun Williams, Philip Simpson. There's just
so many star artists.
Altogether, 13 artists will be in this exhibition.
That is so cool.
Yes.
And how did you go about approaching who you wanted to be in that show? Because I would assume for you, you have a message, an objective that you're trying to achieve through the storyline that you're curating. Then it's like finding the stars for that story.
Yeah, I would say it's a process that's gone on over time. I'm very active within the artistic community here in the city, and I do my best to stay, basically keeping my ear to the ground of who's doing what and seeing some of the hot new artists. And more particularly, I also go to the Detroit Fine Arts Breakfast Club. So it gives me a good, sense of who's doing what. So a lot of these artists, either I've seen from there or seen through some of the exhibitions that they've done, or I've had previous relationships and maybe I've met some through others. But ultimately, it's knowing I want to collaborate in some way. I just don't know what yet, but let's continue to stay in touch. And then I had this opportunity that was given to me through the director of Gallery Camille, asking would I be interested in guest curating some exhibitions. And the first one that came to mind was an exhibition for February, which is Black History Month. And the concept of paying tribute to Detroit's Black artistic community, mainly those who laid the foundation of this, wonderful and creative community through the eyes of newer artists. And at that point, there was just this nice list of people who I wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I mean, that space is so cool. It's such a wide open canvas to kind of showcase the space.
It is.
You yourself, you have a very unique identity to your work. Like when I see a James Charles Morris piece, I instantly recognize it as one of yours. How did you approach developing that unique look to your work?
So it has definitely been something that has been an overtime thing. I've been creating since I was a child, and it's something about the idea of taking something that people would sort of look past and creating something new. I used to do that when I would find things within the house. Like, let's say, one of the biggest things I was really into when I was younger was Back to the Future. And I was, always engaged with the DeLorean, like Time Machine. So I would use like duct tape, cardboard, coins, and just build these models like from scratch. So basically I was doing assemblage pieces since 6-7 years old.
And were you using those pieces as like texture, or how did you use them?
I would use it to, like, case in point, the duct tape would be the stainless steel coating for the actual car. And I would also use, how when you find like thin, like clear plastic from figurines or something like that, I would use that to build the windows. So it was always this, like, just trying to find new resources to create whatever it is that I wanted to make. And I guess it has never left me, because even with the collage work that I'm doing now, it's about finding things that again, you're not necessarily looking for, but when it shows up, you know exactly what you want to do with it. And it's something that has become, as you said, uniquely my own way of creating.
Do you have a name for it?
So there are different modes of, what I do that already has a name: assemblage, photo collage. what I always have looked to it is just it's unnamed, but it's uniquely, my own style. So
You even feature like a lot of recognizable figures in your work. What was your strategy behind that?
So really it is about more so getting into the spirit of that person. It's funny because I had a conversation about this the other day about sort of I guess the taboos in art of when you use recognizable people that sometimes it's not deemed in the fine art, like aspect of creating, more so the commercial aspect. And I always come with the argument of like, when you look at places like the DIA or the Met or whatever, when you look at some of these early European paintings, you're basically looking at the celebrities of their time. And even I can go to the Art Institute of Chicago right now and see an Andy Warhol piece of Elizabeth Taylor. So at a certain point, we have to be mindful of like the arguments we try to make, because I always say, is it more of an argument to grow the artist, or is it an argument to try to discourage the artist?
That is so powerful, because I think too, when you learn the understanding and knowing of, if I can leverage this personality to bring attention to what I'm doing, literally every single media outlet practice that. They'll have celebrities on an interview or late night talk show. Like that's everything in media culture is formatted in that way. So why is it that when an artist tries to have their own interpretation on a personality or an individual that either they respect, admire, or know personally, why is that? Like, why do you think that is shunned or kind of looked at, this is not like real art?
I think it's just personal taste. And unfortunately, personal taste infiltrate, the overall, scope of how art is, is how art is judged or criticized. And it's happened throughout art history. I mean, you cannot find one great artist who hasn't had, this moment where they have been judged or criticized that their work is not real work. I mean, we laud someone like, Vincent van Gogh, but when he was living, it was not deemed a great artist in many people's eyes. A lot of critics or gallerists or even just, common everyday people would look at his work and say, well, this isn't real art, because it's not in the mind of what art at that time should be. And in a sense, he was, moving to his own spirit, and he was always in tune with nature. So his idea was he wanted to create, in that time frame of when the moment was there. So that's why you see the speed approach. That's why you see the more dramatic, brush strokes. So what he was doing was not about, trying to stick to tradition more so than coming out with his own expression. It's what leads to abstract, expressionism in a sense too as well. So it's all about, again, how far the artist is willing to push. But when you have those who are traditionally bound to what a certain, genre is, then there is that pushback. It's just like what we see with AI. It's like there's going to be that pushback from those. But if you know how to utilize that tool in a way that is beneficial, then welcome it, because
100%. And it's also like, and I kind of see it as a form of control and manipulation, because I think that, today a common conversation for artists is, marketing your work as an artist. And how do we do that effectively? How do we build brand? How do we, and obviously artists are very mindful and creative in the way of how they create work, but they're also very mindful and creative in how they approach getting their work in front of different groups of people, like with the shows, the pop-up exhibitions and stuff. Like, artists understand, and I'm sure this has been, for some time now, but it's something that is, I see more actively practiced, is independent artists are now teaming up with other artists, or they're inviting other artists, and they're just doing it themselves. With that approach, like, how do you see that? Like, what do you strategically, like the methodology behind it, how do you approach something like that? Because it's a unique opportunity. I mean, it's an opportunity to market your work in a way that attracts traffic. Because usually as an artist, if you finish a new piece and you post a picture on social media, yeah, you're going to get likes, you're going to get, comments and stuff. But when you can get almost like a live activation, when you can get people to a space and meet you and talk to you and interact with you, these people fall in love with you. These people are like, oh my gosh, I've never known this guy before, but he's so smart. Like, it's like you really get a strong sense of the person attached to the visual that you're seeing.
It's funny because I think you've explained a lot just within that. It's funny because I think collaboration, especially within arts, I mean, that's been going on for forever. So, I mean, it's just now it finds new faces and new spaces to bring that about. Even here in Detroit, I think about the history of the city and thinking about just how many artists who are, who came about in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, especially Black artists, they had to find ways to exhibit their works because most traditional galleries at that time were excluding a lot of Black artists. The DIA, I think about maybe institutions like the Detroit Artist Market, who was one of the early galleries to start to welcome Black artists with art, figures like Huey Lee Smith and Charles McGee. And there's a reason why they still, are, in business for, almost 100 years because they always sort of tried to be, amongst the community. But again, when you don't have spaces like that, you have to find, ways to say, all right, how can we make this happen? And I forget the name of the book, but I remember I read it. This was maybe about a few years ago, and it was talking about the nature of Black artists and ways to exhibit. And I'll never forget this quote that said, you can exhibit in apartment buildings, but as long as you create, present it in a way that is becoming of the artist, that's what matters. So it's always about the presentation. So going back to what you were saying about marketing, I believe that presentation and how you introduce anything is key. So with my work, I let it more so speak for itself because I think in the age of trends, like with TikTok and Instagram and all of that, you're always trying to follow a certain trend to say, this is how I'm going to debut my work or whatever the case may be. And I'm just from the school where if the work is powerful enough, you don't need to have too much flash. Just put it out there and let, the audience be, the deciding factor of if this is something that can resonate or if you need to go back to the drawing board.
Also, too, it's not like if you put it out tomorrow and you only get 10 likes, that a year from now, the story's going to be completely different. Somebody that follows you may repost it a year from now and they may have a large following and it might turn into a viral moment. I think that another thing is that a lot of times I think people get so locked in that it's just, this is my one chance. No, take that, flip it, remix it, and reverse it, put it out 10 different other ways, see what works. No, and this is the thing, man. Like, so many people think that big corporations got it all figured out. They don't. They just got more money. They just got more money to test and spin to figure out what works.
Have you ever seen this meme where it shows a person who's had plastic surgery and says, you're not ugly, you just don't have enough money?
Or not the right surgeon. But it's so true, man. I think that, nothing's concrete. I say this often is that people fear that when they put something out, that's it. The world's going to judge them on that. People forget. Literally a week from now, they'll forget what was it called? What colors? The mind forgets because we're consuming so fast now that we have that opportunity and that chance to fuck up. Fuck up again. And then it's going to be like so much better by the time, 2 or 3 months from now and you figured out like, oh, I get now the flow that's working. I get now what, how people like to receive it. So it's just one of those things that you got to allow yourself to kind of explore the options and see what works best for you. That's it.
It's funny because I always would think of my approaches being like incense, where you light it, it's a slow burn, but it has impact. It spreads around the room. Huge. If you're fire, it's like, okay, it can immediately be extinguished and then it cools off. But with incense, even after it's done burning, it's still going to resonate probably hours, even a day after it's been lit. So if you are in that mindset, it's like, all right, you know you have a little bit of time before you have to light your next stick. So go ahead and use that to work on whatever it is that you have brewing in your mind.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I'm curious. I want to ask you this question as a established, successful artist. If you could have 10, 20 plus gallery directors, owners in a room sitting with you,
Yeah.
what would you want to say to all of them in that moment?
Well, my girlfriend has tried to get me to stop cussing, so I'm not going to say what.
Cuss.
She's going to watch eventually.
We'll just bleep it out.
But yeah, honestly, I would say most of y'all don't really know what you're talking about. And that's just me being honest, because case in point, think about some of these documentaries that have come out over the last few years, a band called Def, Searching for Sugar Man. All of these different, pieces that have brought light to people who we didn't really know about, or they were sort of cut off before they had an opportunity to make their impact. Now, those are examples of people who more so are under the radar, but how many more people do we know who don't get the opportunity to, let's say, get that documentary or get that exhibition? And there's so many stories like that where you have artists who are doing phenomenal works, but have never got the opportunity to showcase their work. And even when you're talking about older artists, it's almost like history is unkind to those who are not within certain circles. So the first thing I would tell to any of these directors or gallerists is like, do you know about Ernest Hartman? Do you know about Leroy Foster? Do you know about Henry Umbanji King? Do you know about Cleety Taylor? And if you don't, this is why you should know about them. Because when you start talking about the overall conversation of Black art in this country, Detroit was at the forefront of a lot of beautiful movements that were happening. But unfortunately, it doesn't get the recognition. So think about a young, let's say, BA or MA graduate from, let's say, Wayne State or NYU or whatever the case may be. They're only going to be given what is required in the syllabus. Unless they are ambitious enough where they're going to study outside of their classes, you're not going to hear about some of these artists. So in your mind, you're thinking you know everything, but how many artists have gone through, our world? And how many actually got the opportunity to showcase their brilliance? So that's why I would say you don't know anything, because you're not fully exposed to the full story. That's what I would say to them.
It's such an important topic, because I think that anybody that speaks on anything has to know what was before what is. Because if you try to say, well, it's never been this, yes, it has, just not during your time.
Yeah.
So it's like people feel what they feel because of what happened. Yeah. And if you don't know what happened and you're not going to be able to fully comprehend why they feel that way, how can you begin to change anything if you don't know why you're changing it?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think you're such a perfect person to have, a voice on that topic, because your grandmother, I mean, there's a mural of her in Midtown Detroit by Ijinga Cortez.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing a little bit on?
Also, Ijinga is going to be in that exhibition too as well, Living Frequency.
It's going to be so awesome. February 8th.
Yeah, February 8th, yes.
Do you mind sharing a little bit on your grandmother's legacy?
Yeah. So imagine being a kid and you see your either your parents or your grandparents doing these things that you're looking at it as, oh, this is just what they do. But it isn't until you get older that you realize what they did. And as a kid, it was, I want to spend time in my grandmother's, place of business. And for a young creative kid, it was like, Disneyland for the most part. You're looking at all these works on the walls. You're seeing because she used to also deal antiques too as well, all of the different furniture and knickknacks and all of that. But as time went on, I started to see the art world through her eyes. So that's when I was introduced to people like a Gilda Snowden and a Sabrina Nelson and a young Mario Moore when he was coming out of college, and really understanding just the nature of dealing with artists, like being at her gallery and starting to eventually work for her, hanging shows and helping design flyers and putting together mailing lists and different things like that. You start to learn the whole process of that. And what you learn is that, wow, like there's a lot that goes into it. So when you're now learning later on about the impact of what she was doing through other people, then you're like, wow, I saw all of that. And you don't realize that now that's embedded in you because you are being exposed to that and you're learning firsthand that process of how to deal with artists, how to go about curating, and the process of that. I mean, it was a lesson. Those were lessons that were being ingrained in me as early as 13 years old. So it's, I guess her legacy, is about growth within the arts, because you think about her grandson. Now think about all of these other young artists who are looking for opportunities to showcase their works in a gallery, looking for mid-career artists who were looking for other, spaces to showcase. What she did was she always allowed the opportunity to say, look, if you have something good, let me see it, and then let's find a space for you. Like, I'll never forget when she gave an opportunity for me to curate an exhibition in 2007. And at that time, I already had a number of artists who I wanted to showcase. But I remember she telling me about Mario and saying Sabrina's son Mario is a up-and-coming artist.
What year was this?
This was 2007. Wow. So the name of the exhibition was called Lyrical Art Form Hip Hop: A Global Notice. And it was at that time paying tribute to the past 35 years of hip hop culture. So there were depictions through painting, through photography, through sculpture. And it was essential to have the 5 elements of hip hop within this exhibition: emceeing, graffiti, DJing, b-boying, and knowledge and wisdom and understanding.
Where was this exhibition? Where did it take place?
So this was at my grandmother's gallery.
Which was located?
This was when she was over in Midtown on Cass and Willis. At the time, the building was called the Spiral Collective, and there were 4 businesses in one. So it was all Black women who owned it. It was Textures by Nefertiti, Source Booksellers, Talani Rose, which was my aunt's shop, and then my grandmother's gallery. So, and it took about almost 2 years to put this exhibition together. So there were a lot of, artists who either were a part of it and decided to drop out. But Mario was a late addition, so much so that unfortunately a lot of the material doesn't have his name on it, which sucks, But I was actually able to pull one of his, I think it was his artist statement from the records. And it was just interesting seeing that from, I don't know how old he was at that time, but I think he was either in his early 20s or somewhere around that age. But that was one of his first shows. And it was a piece that he brought in called Hip Hop Bunch, which now is at the YMCA, Bowl YMCA. But it's just that whole notion of giving an opportunity, which my grandmother was always about that for a lot of younger and up and coming artists. And I can literally do a whole show on just her impact in the city of Detroit. It's amazing.
So what has been the biggest or best piece of advice or lesson or kind of through her own experience that she shared with you as a successful gallerist?
So it was actually when I was getting ready to open up my clothing boutique that I owned for 10 years called Definitive Style Exclusive. And I remember having a conversation with her and just telling her about what I was getting ready to do. And one of the things she said was, you have to make sure that you are at a place where you just basically understanding that people in a sense are buying you, and you have to be at a place where you're welcoming. You have to be personable, because I'm still to this day a very introverted person. Like, I'm not a go out and I'm going to be life of the party. I'm going to go out. I'm going to take in what I need to take in, and then I head home. I have this running joke when people ask me what I'm going to do on a, weekend, and I say I'm going to club bed with DJ Sheets. So
I'm at that same club though, man. Like it really is like a lot of people, as of late are surprised to find out that I'm also super introverted.
Mm-hmm.
For majority of my career, I spent all of my time behind the camera. That it's like, now it's like, what do you mean you're so comfortable? But it's just, it's going back to what you said earlier. It's just like, if you have those 10,000 plus hours in, it's not going to feel, it's going to feel effortless, you know, because you're not playing a role, you're just playing yourself, you know?
And to be fair, I actually, you know, I love conversation. So I think it never was like hard for me to be able to like adjust into that role because, again, I was very young when I started DSC. I was 23 when I signed the lease, 24 when I opened up the space. So, you know, I was the young buck in that area, and it's just interesting because even my girlfriend talks about this. She says, you know, you're an old man. You know, like you're older than.
How old are you?
I'm 40.
You're so young, though. That's the thing. Like, I think that a lot of people, they think that even 50 is young in my eyes. Because I think that if you're fortunate, blessed to live, you just said your grandmother is about to be 90.
Just turned 97.
97.
And it's funny, when I mean old, I don't mean old as in like the physical aspect. It's more so, I think it's the spirit. Yeah, the spirit that she finds that it's like you've, basically the saying, you know, you've been here before. But at the same time, it's like, you know, even though I know I'm getting older, I feel like I'm getting younger in the process because.
You said that. What was the quote you said?
Yeah. So like, even though I'm getting older, I still, you know, even though I'm getting older, I feel like I'm getting younger too as well. And it's more so because I'm finding that love that I had when I was a kid, as far as like, one of the, and you can actually find this on, if you go to my website, you can see my artist statement where I say, curiosity is the driving force of my work. And as a kid, you know, get around any child and the first thing you'll notice is, wow, they ask a lot of questions because they're trying to learn. And I think sometimes when we get older, we sort of come into this place where we feel like we know everything and no one can tell us anything. And that's why I go back to the whole, when you ask me about the directors, it's like to act like you know is basically causing stagnation. When you allow yourself to be open to ask questions and always be curious, then you never age.
It's my favorite thing to do. You know, and as of late, it's been my favorite thing to do on camera because there's this thing that I call, I don't know if I should say, but I'll say it this way. There's this thing that when the lights go on, the cameras turn on, there's like this wall that just instantly falls down. And you can talk openly and have conversations with people and get information out of them, not in the sense of like, I'm trying to get information to make a crazy headline. No, it's just like how we were saying off camera. There's certain things that our family didn't talk about at the dinner table. Doesn't mean that our community shouldn't have access to that information. You and I are now in positions where we have a platform and we're able to share what we've learned with our people. Why wouldn't we do that? You know?
And it's crazy because I guess when you come up in a place where you have people who are more like willing, like most of my tribe when I was coming up, they were very open to say, look, anything you want to know, ask us and we'll tell you, you know, like we'll point you in the direction where you need to go. So it was always interesting when I would run into people, whether they would be older than me or maybe a contemporary who would play the I don't know game. And I always say, be careful with that, because if you continue to act like you don't know, sometimes God has a way of, you know, like, you know, taking that to a whole nother level. And so, yeah, I never understood the whole idea of, you know, keeping resources or gatekeeping or whatever term you want to give it, because it's sort of like, all right, what's the old saying when it comes to when you leave this earth, you know, like
you can't take nothing with you.
Yeah, you can't take anything with you. You know, like to this day, you're not going to see a Brinks truck pull up to, you know, like a cemetery. So
I honestly think that you graduate. Like once you have what you need, you graduate to a new experience, you know? So it's like, if we withhold information, we're withholding that progression, you know, and this world, this experience that we're so fortunate to get to experience. So your grandmother, I would assume, shared so much information with you. What were some of the piece of of advice or tips that she gave you when it came to developing relationships with like collectors or people that, you know, invest in art?
Honesty is key. I never liked the whole idea of collectors playing the money game when it comes to art. Like,
What do you mean by that?
so what I mean is that looking at art as a commodity as opposed to something that will bring some sort of, you know, like joy to your life. Like every piece that is on my wall, whether it be my own work or somebody else's work, it's something that I'm attached to, something that I appreciate. And before artwork can appreciate, you know, in a monetary sense, it has to appreciate in your soul. And I would never tell anybody who's collecting work to buy, you know, solely on the artist's name or what you think you can get as far as a return. So that's never been her approach when it comes to selling work. She always looked at it as I'm building a relationship, a friendly relationship. She had that with her artists. She had that with her collectors. A lot of her collectors, like, are family. Like, I know them. They've been, you know, at over our house, you know, like family functions. When she had her 97th birthday party, a lot of those people who she's known in that, you know, period when she had the gallery was there. And to me, that's more important than just saying, let me sell a piece. Because I've been in so many galleries where it is so cold, not welcoming. Why are you here? You know, and if you're not interested in buying the work, it's like you can look around for a little bit, but don't expect to get a real conversation out of me.
I think that we got lost in the conversation of transaction. It's not a matter of I'm trying to trick you or con you into, and I'm not saying this is for everybody. I'm saying a lot of people don't want to start that conversation because of the people that fucked it up for other people. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, if you're trying to present yourself as a product, as a brand, it's like, I'm not reaching out. I'm not doing this to like trick you into giving me money and I'm running with your money. No, this is a partnership. Like, there's something here that I have a gift of value. I'm just sharing it with you. We're having a conversation. Whether you feel like that is worth your investment, that's up to you. And I think that a lot of people find friction in that because they think that, well, I don't want to present myself as I'm desperately trying to get money from this person. But instead, I think that the conversation in itself has to be crafted in an art where it's like people really understand the investment that they're getting, you know, because not everybody's for everybody. It really is like being a talent scout. If you own a record label, for example, you're searching for people that you're going to put money into in hopes that you're going to get a return someday, you know, but it's a relationship. They're bringing something to the table. You're bringing something to the table. That's how business is. Business is not a matter of I'm looking to hire this person or get from this person to do for me. No, it's like if you have something and you're trying to build it, you need people. Now you put your talent scout cap on and you go find those people that are going to help you bring that to fruition.
No,
you know,
you definitely said a mouthful with that. And I mean, it is, and that again goes back to the question you were asking about my grandmother. You know, that's again when, like, it's funny because with my family, I don't think there was a lot of advice giving. It was more so like their actions spoke, you know. So it's like you watch that and you see it play out. So when you, like, my dad would always say this to me when, you know, like when I F up or whatever, and he was like, you know what you need to do? You need to just go ahead and do it. And it's like, it was more so saying, I want you to understand what you did, as opposed to me telling and giving you a whole lecture as why you messed up and all of this. It's like, dude, if you know that you're feeling bad, good, feel bad. Do you want to feel better? Good. You know what you need to do to feel better. If you need to apologize to a person, do that. If you need to take care of this responsibility, do that. He did not, you know, pea-foot around pretty much. You know,
it's literally laying a brick down. You know, I had a conversation with somebody that was going through a difficult time, and it really kind of opened my mind because I think that we're very blessed to be in a mental state that is stable and strong. Not everybody's in that place, you know, and it's easy for us to say, just do this, just do this. But when you try to pull yourself into their mind and think, man, like, because I remember him saying, like, nothing makes him happy.
Yeah.
Nothing, like nothing. I'm like, and for me, I'm the type of person where I'm like, all right, let me figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into my mind and I was like, all right, well, the only piece of advice that I could give to somebody that is going through that and feels that is that, you know, I think that when you work with your hands
Mm-hmm.
and you do one brick at a time, and then you're able to step back and look and be like, it may not be right away like happy, but it starts with
Yeah.
and then a turns into huh.
Yeah.
You know, what can I do next? You know, so then you start to get a little bit closer to some sort of happiness, you know, and I think that that is literally what we're here to do in this world. We're here to just enjoy it and be happy and be a part of helping other people get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, you know, think about if, you know what I mean? It's always the thing of, you know, the conversation that if God told you how long you had on this earth and telling you what you have to do, it's like, one, I think if you knew how long you had, you would spend more time messing up because in your mind you would think, well, you know what, I got 50 years to mess around. But it's like, what are you really learning in that respect? So you have to always be in the mindset to say, you don't know what tomorrow brings. So you saying, you know, about laying bricks, like that has been my, you know, whole way of moving is, look, you have a day. What can you do with that day?
Mm-hmm.
If the day just requires you to rest, that's the best you can do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can.
100%. And I like to say this. I like to say, if God came down right now and said, James, you're going to live to 100 years of age. This world, you think it's amazing? Wait till the next one. It's going to blow your mind out. Then you're in this place where you're just like, wait a minute, hold on.
You're waiting for like,
but then tying into what you just said. All right, so what can I do with this time that I got here? I'm about to like try everything. I'm about to make a ton of mistakes. Who cares? Like, I'm just gonna have fun. And that's honestly the message that I hope to get out and spread to specifically to people that have been suppressed, people that have been told no, people that have been made to feel like they're not enough. I want people to know that there's so much more to be excited about that you have no idea.
Yeah.
And it literally just starts by connecting to yourself and knowing that every day is going to be more exciting, you know. It's just time. You got to give it time, you know, like the saying goes, you can't throw a pack of seeds into a body of dirt and think that in a couple of hours you're going to get a whole garden. You know, it's going to sprout over time, you know?
I love that you said that because that unfortunately that's unfortunately our generation and the one that's coming after us in a nutshell, where it's like we want things instantaneously. And it's like, I would tell people this, how long do you think it takes to build a house? Like, what do you think goes into the foundation of that house? Like, what do you think goes into the structure?
Craftsmanship.
I mean, it takes, especially a good house. Now, if you want a quick, hey, let me go ahead and get this McDonald's built, no diss to McDonald's, but, you know, McDonald's built house, then yeah, cool. Fast food house, call it a day. But if you want something that you know is going to stand the test of time, you get the right builders, you get the best cement, you go ahead and you get the right interior decorators, you get the top electricians. And this is about, again, the relationships. My uncle used to tell me this all the time. He said, if you do it right the first time, you don't have to do it again. And I think that unfortunately, we are so quick to look for this result where we don't even take the time to see what it takes to build. Like, even when I had my shop, I used to get all the time, like younger kids who would, you know, say, how can I do this? Or how can I be in your shop? Or whatever the case may be. And I would be real with them. I said, if you come in here and you design something for me, I'm going to take this amount from it. I can do that and we can make that work. Or I can give you the necessary tools and give you the guidance and give you a, you know, like a push, and you can own 100% of that. And to me, it's more important to put into the mind of someone to say, look, if you take your time and do it right, you can be in a better position than if you know, sort of mess up or mess around. Yeah.
That's the story of entrepreneurship.
Oh,
That's the story why a lot of people don't follow through with it. I think that, you know, And it's so interesting because I started my agency in 2016. So I'm coming up on that 10 years.
Nice.
And I've heard so many people that I look up to say that, man, it was 10 years until I started making money. Because you got to pay for all the things it costs to run a business. You're usually not paying yourself. And it's so, when I was in my I'm like, man, I'm going to do that in 5 years. I'm going to but it really is true. Like you really get a sense, like the saying goes, 10,000 hours, you're in, like it really is, because you have to figure yourself out.
Yeah.
Figure yourself out as a business person, as an entrepreneur, as a strategic leader. Like, how are you going to sustain this and grow it to live beyond you? If that's what you want, that's not for everybody, but I think for those of us that do want to build something that is, sustainable and lives beyond us, you can't fast forward that. It really is brick by brick.
Yeah. And of course, the mistakes that are made along the way, because that's what allows you to truly grow. And when you go through those, like I'll never forget when I opened my shop, and this was maybe about a couple of weeks after, opening the doors. The original shop had these slat walls on the right side of the shop when you walk in, and unfortunately, I didn't put the rack on studs, and within 3 days, the rack came tumbling down. So it was one of those trial by error type things, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's in the slat, it holds, not realizing, dude, you still have to, make sure
it's you learned, like you have to fall to know what it feels like and know what it feels like to get back up and keep going.
Yeah.
Like that is something, like there's so many different like visual examples in life, like how we just said about the garden. They're there to teach us. It's the same for you as a human.
Yeah.
Like it takes time, I think a lot of artists struggle with like the balance of like, I want to be creative, but I also know I have to run this business. Like, how do you find that balance?
Look, I'd be a millionaire if I had like a solution for that, because it's never easy. And I've yet to find an artist who just has it all figured out. It's more so what works for you. I think what has helped me is I'm very much a minimalist. So it's like I don't, require a lot to live. So I remember when my car broke down in 2014, and my whole idea was, let me go ahead and get a new car. But then I realized I live in Midtown Detroit, so everything is within 5 minutes, driving or biking from what I need. So didn't need a car. It costs less to, take Lyft monthly.
I mean, in New York, nobody has a car.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a drive, like they have a driver, they have an Uber, that, it's just, it's about efficiency. And I think that is such an important point, because a lot of people, especially young people, they go on social media, they see this image, they're like, oh, I got to be that. No, you really have to you have to go inside to figure out like, what do I enjoy? What do I need?
Yeah. And again, I don't need much. So, I mean, it's most of what I wear, it's like, I look at my bracelet here. I made this. I look at what I'm wearing right now. It's like I can count on, a $100 bill, how much most of this cost, So it's basically, you set uniformity for yourself. Like when I go out, I know that I carry myself a certain way. I dress a certain way. I wear certain colognes. I make sure that I'm groomed a certain way. I do that, meticulously to a point that I know that, no, I'm not going to wow you with a new pair of Jordans or a new watch or, one of the, I don't know, I don't want to put brands on here, but you know what I'm saying, like no name brand stuff or whatever. But what I am going to give you is, my spirit. And my spirit, really, the spirit should always be more of a presence than what you're wearing.
100%.
Yeah.
The energy you carry. I think it's so important. People can feel it. You can walk into a room and people are like, who's something special about that person? Because they're connected to themselves. They don't need to wear certain clothes or drive certain cars.
Mm-mm.
It's like, because none of it matters. None of it matters. Like how we said, when we leave this earth, none of it is coming with us.
One of my favorite books in the Bible is Ecclesiastes. And I mean, you start off the book with Solomon saying, vanity, vanity, everything is vanity. You know, that's where you get the term, nothing is new under the sun. And when you start really breaking down this world and what really matters, it's like, I mean, and I don't want to be, because I've never had a nihilistic attitude about life. It's more so understanding that, you know, you can't take much of this serious. You can't get to a point where it's like, this is so much a priority that you lose focus in what you need. Like even, you know, as an artist where the biggest thing is, you know, you hope to sustain. So when you're asking about, you know, how do you find that balance? Like I've started to change up my wording. So
that's huge. That's a conversation that I love to have.
Yeah, man. So
the words.
So I even got like chills thinking about that. It's like, and I'm going to tell you this, it changes everything when you.
It's an art.
Yeah, man. It's the best way I can describe it is I remember there was a time where I used to say, man, you know, because I was, you know, a little bit unsatisfied with my place, you know, like I needed more room. And I remember just saying, I need a new home. I need a new home. And then I remember I was going through some situations where I almost lost my place. And something, you know, hit me where it says, you know what? Are you grateful for your home? Are you grateful for your space? Are you thankful no matter how big or small it is? Are you grateful? So I started saying, I don't want a new home. I just want a new couch. Reason why I would say that is because you know currently the space that you have does not have room for a couch. So if you want a couch, that means that you'll be provided the space for that couch to be able to be.
The power of your words. And I honestly, I stopped caring if people think I'm crazy when I say this. Your words literally are equivalent to rubbing the genie bottle.
Oh, yeah.
You say it out loud into the universe. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, like the garden. Say it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Like it's going to happen. We may not fully understand in this flesh how it works, but when the universe is constantly listening, God is constantly listening.
Even when we're joking.
Even when we're joking, even like, and on that note, you know how a lot of people say, oh, and I don't even want to say it because I don't, DYING, like they're laughing and they're like, oh man, you got me over here, you know? I'm like, you cannot say that, you know? It's so, it matters, you know? But you have to go thorough into it. The same way that if you're an artist, you can visually see what you want on that canvas, or at least kind of see like an idea, and then you over time start to like bring it to life. You have to do the same thing with your life. What color do you want that car? Did you find a picture on Instagram and you like the layout of the property, you like the layout of the living room, print it out, put it on your wall. You know, you have to start putting the building blocks together. How do you expect anyone else to do that for you if you're not willing to do it for yourself?
And that's what a lot of people unfortunately run into, is that they're not willing to do that building. And I mean, the thing about it is everybody has this ability. It's all within us. Unfortunately, we have been programmed to say, no, you need to do da-da-da-da, and this, that, and the third, you know, like moving away from that whole, you know, the term manifesting, where I say it's more so, like you say, you're speaking things, you know, that you're asking, like you're praying, you're manifesting, you're meditating, however you choose to identify it. I look at it as like, as an artist, I can't say money. The reason why I say money is because that's not the focus. The focus is I need resources. So the resources, the studio space, you know, the materials, the gallery space, the time, you know, like
the money will find its way to you because the universe knows what you want. And I think that a big part of it is like when you don't know what you want, that is very like that to me, I feel like is the root of anxiety. I feel like when you're thinking about things, but you don't know why you're thinking about it, or you're mad about something, you don't know why you're mad about it, it starts to build anxiety. And I think that when you have all of these mental blocks in your mind, you know, some people like to term it creative block. You know, it's really, I think that if you don't allow your mind to kind of like reset and refresh, You know, the same way we plug in our phones and we charge it back up. Like, we don't do that enough. So you mentioned you're like, sometimes you just want to chill for the day. Just do it. Don't feel guilty about it. Just, you don't owe anybody an explanation. Just do it. It's yours.
And that's the thing, man. It's like some people, especially if there's a business attached to what you do, like I've lost count how many shirts I've, printed over a 15-year period. But, I have the shoulder pain to, to be
to remember.
Yeah, to remember that. So it's sort of like sometimes people don't understand that, hey, we break down, we have moments, like I'm not a business of many, I'm a business of one. And I never really talked about that because I don't like the woe is me attitude, and not to say that
What does that mean, the woe is me?
So I think what happens is sometimes people try to play up that they're so busy and they're so this, that, and the third that they want people to feel sorry for them. And I'm one of those that's like, look, I'm not saying for anybody who does that they're wrong. It's just for me, I'm like, I know regardless of what I'm going through, no one is here to save you. You have to be the one to say you have to take care of yourself, whether it's mentally, physically, spiritually. You are the person who decides that, nobody else. And when you become so dependent on others for how you navigate in this life, then you are not in control. You basically are beholden to whoever it is that you say, hey, I need this person to make me feel happy, or I need this clothing attire to feel happy, or I need to smell a certain way or whatever. And it's like, yo, what you doing? It's like, that doesn't matter. So no, even when it's moments where I know, hey, I just say, like, case in point, best way I can describe it. If I know I'm in a situation where, let's say an order is behind, I reach out to the person. I say, hey, this is what's going on. I don't go into full details. I say there is a delay. Hope you can understand. Thank you for your patience. But we will make sure to take care of you. Don't go. Yeah.
That's huge. And I think it's so important to also state, like, let those moments happen. Because in those moments, you feel what you would have rather feel. And you also feel like, oh, I don't want this to happen again. So I'm going to make sure I put something into place that makes sure that this doesn't happen at least frequently. Because I think that when you have those moments, and they happen often, whether it's, a client not happy with the outcome or the time frame or miscommunication or whatever it is, you feel it, you analyze it, your brain recalibrates, and then you're like, all right, let's adjust. But the thing is, a lot of people fear feeling that because they're like, oh man, I don't want to feel that pit in my stomach, like then I'm a failure. No, you're not a failure. You just fucked up. And now you're learning how to make it better. You can't, but you can't, how you said earlier, you don't know until you do it. It's a huge thing. So James, you're not only a full-time artist, but you're also involved in other projects, such as the Detroit exhibit. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this actually began as early as November of 2023. The name itself actually came to mind, and it was just more so of, what can I do with this? I just like it. It's a very intriguing name, but I had no idea what. I just knew that that there was going to be some involvement with highlighting, the art scene here in Detroit. But it actually came about when I was at this exhibition, and I think it was February of 2024. And I'm not going to put anybody out on blast, even though I want to. But it was an exhibition that featured a lot of artists who, let's just say, didn't live in the city of Detroit, even though the name of the exhibition was called Art We Love Detroit. And it wasn't a true representation of what Detroit is, as far as the community is concerned. And that really wasn't sort of the thing that, the straw that broke the camel's back. It was actually when I saw this piece that looked like an artist who I personally knew. His name is Antonio Shades Agee, and well-regarded graffiti artist in the city of Detroit, considered the first graffiti artist in the city of Detroit. And I look at this work and I realize it's not his work. And it's this young, artist who basically created this work that if you didn't know, you would think is Shades. So I asked one of the organizers about the artist, and first I wanted to know about the artists themselves, and then I had told them, "Do you know who Antonio Shades Agee is?" And he's like, "Yeah, well, don't you think this is very similar to his work?"
You asked the artist
No,
himself.
no. I asked the organizer of the exhibition, and basically it became an argument of derivative work, and the whole idea of nothing is new, and I understand that from the aspect of, yes, an artist does utilize other means to create like inspiration. But when you have something that looks basically just like another person's work, and then also the fact that this is a Black artist who was the originator and a white artist, like who's giving this praise, we all know what can happen a lot of times, that sometimes that artist of color is left out of the conversation. And that was the bigger picture. So it didn't help that this organizer was defending the younger artist, to the end. And I left the exhibition just steaming. And it was a friend of mine who was with me, who basically said, let's go get something to eat. And, basically to make a long story short, as we're sitting down eating, it was like the whole mission of the Detroit exhibit was, transmitted into my spirit. And it was about understanding that moment to say that there should not be a situation where anybody who has contributed to this scene is left out of the conversation. And that's where the Detroit exhibit
It's such an interesting conversation, James, because I think that I've had multiple perspectives on this point. Some artists that are like, you know what, I'm not offended if somebody, they get inspired by my work and they have the funds to make something happen. And then I have some that are like, if it looks anything like mine, I'm pissed, and I get it. I understand. And on that point, I think, and it's not that I like to find a way to walk this line. It's just I like to find a way to communicate it in a way that makes sense to the party that's doing it.
Yeah.
Because I think that oftentimes our emotions kind of block the effectiveness of the communication, And we were saying off camera about, a billboard that just popped up in Campus Martius about, it reads, Detroit put the world on wheels, and now we are putting the world in houses. And there is a Caucasian woman and her baby standing in front of a house that looks like it's from the hood, like Detroit. And I'm like, that just feels weird. And it's not to say, I'm not somebody that's like, this group should have more than this group or whatever. It's just when you're trying to adopt culture for your benefit and you're not putting those, like everybody that's like right now buzzing about Detroit, this has been here for a minute. People are just now starting to get notice of our culture, They're starting to take notice and they appreciate it. They love it. And they're coming, and a lot of them are capitalizing off of it.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, if you can come with opportunity, like I was saying to you off camera about the founder of Fossil, like he came at a time when Detroit was going through a bankruptcy and he wanted to pump into the city, created jobs and all this. He didn't just come in and do some stuff and leave. Like you see, because he's the founder of Shinola Detroit. You see like Shinola's impact in the city, and it's creating jobs and it's doing a lot of positive stuff for our city. So I think it really does matter that when people come in and try to leverage our culture, they see it as a partnership, not as their thing. Because it's not their thing,
And it's very, and again, going back into the nature of the Detroit exhibit. So when the idea came about to build this platform, it was understanding that, just like you said, that there's something that's already been here. And just like asking about my background, I saw firsthand Detroit's Black artistic community, or as I called it, the Detroit artistic community, because Detroit for 50, 60 years has been majority Black. I mean, at one point it was almost 90% Black. Still to this day, it's about 78 point something percent. So you're talking about a large majority. And what I see in this respect is the institutions, the galleries, those who have their own idea of what it is that should be celebrated, what should be highlighted. And just like you were making a point of about, any type of racist ideology, some may have that, but a lot of people are just going with what they know. And if you don't put in front of them the importance of what it is that you're trying to convey, like there is no way I would do an exhibition on the history of Detroit artists and not include a number of Black artists in this city. Yes, we're going to talk about Marshall Fredericks. Yes, we're going to talk about Scott Hawking. Yes, we're going to talk about, like a lot of artists who made their mark, but to not speak about Oliver Legrone, to not speak about, Shirley Woodson or Cleety Taylor or Leroy Foster or the foundation that was laid by Arts Extended or Contemporary Studio. And it's like you're leaving so much out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, Detroit, when it comes to patrons of African-American art, is one of the largest markets in this country for African-American art patrons. So at a time, more than New York, we're talking about the Mecca of American art, of art, one of the meccas of art, period. So to say that and know that it's documented and it's talked about, it's sort of like, why are we playing this game that Detroit is this blank canvas when it comes to, art and culture? I know we have the automobile. I know we have Motown. But to act like Detroit has no culture when we have one of the largest collection of African-American artifacts in the Charles Wright Museum, one of the most esteemed art collections in the Detroit Institute of Arts, two of the top arts foundations in the Kresge and the Knight Foundation. I mean, it's sort of like trying to put a piece of plexiglass over sod that already exists and then putting your own side and saying we're doing something new.
100%. The unfortunate part is that there are some people that just have the mindset or approach that they just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have those people, like you just said, they just don't know.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing with the Detroit exhibit, documenting history, is so important and vital to the longevity of the Detroit art community for long after we're no longer here, 100+ years from now.
Yeah.
People are going to be able to go back and reference, because we were also saying buildings come down, murals come down, pieces come off of walls and they go into, storage. There has to be more conversations about what has happened.
Yeah.
So that way there starts to be a stronger understanding with younger generations of why their current situation is what it is.
No question. And it's just funny because I think about something like the Harlem Renaissance, where there was a landmark exhibition that was done at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and it covered, the artists who were a part of that movement. And the only thing about Detroit, and this is the unfortunate thing, and this is why there was this need to say, as far as the approach of building the Detroit exhibit, is, albeit you had artists who were making their mark, I think as far as naming what this movement was, there has never really been this collective push to say, here's all of this information to say, this is who was, at the head of what was going on. This is, the organizations that were happening. And it's like you have blurbs. Like, case in point, the oldest art institute, or the oldest art institution in the city of Detroit, the first one was sponsored by the Detroit Urban League, called the Pen and Palette Club. This was founded by then Urban League President John C. Dancy. And this was a response of the Great Migration, a lot of Blacks who were moving in the city of Detroit. And it was trying to create programs that would, enrich the community within culture. So it was dance, theater, writing, and visual art. But through that organization, it created an outlet for a lot of the young, at the time, young artists who would become, sort of the main figures of Detroit's scene at that time. So Leroy Foster, Ernest Hartman, who unfortunately is a name that a lot of people don't know of, except for some of the artists who were part of that period. Cleety Taylor, who was the co-founder of Arts Extended, the first Black-owned gallery in the city of Detroit. Myrtle Hall, I think I did say Shirley Woodson, Charles McGee, Huey Lee Smith, who is a nationally known artist, was also a part of that movement. He moved from Cleveland and came to Detroit, went to Wayne State, was a participant at the Pen and Palette Club, was a student at the time the Society of Arts and Crafts, which is now Center for Creative Studies. So it's, once you really dig deep into that story, you realize, like, if you have someone like an Ernest Hartman who came up from Cleveland with Huey Lee Smith when they were contemporaries, it's like, how is Ernest Hartman not in that conversation, yet Huey Lee Smith is? Mm-hmm. I've seen Ernest Hartman's work in person. It is amazing. Unfortunately, because he passed at age 53 in 1967 from cancer, his name, unfortunately, just got lost to time. Mm. And
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If you could tell or go 100 years from now and speak with a emerging artist in the city, mm-hmm. Why would you say to them it's important for them to know these names?
I think it's just more so knowing where you come from, because I can tell you this, there have been a lot of young artists who I have spoken to and started, like case in point with the exhibition that's happening February 8th. The focus is to pay homage to that period, to these artists who have either passed on or who are still living and should get their flowers while they can smell them. But it was more so presenting these stories and presenting these images. And it was interesting seeing some of the responses from a lot of these younger artists. And, just like, I didn't know, I didn't realize. Because they're not told. That again goes.
What were some of the responses? What were they saying?
I think it's just more so seeing that, wow, this has been going on. This is not something new. Because I think the narrative for most is we just started really having an impact in the arts here in the city of Detroit. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't tell you how many times I go out of town, and when I speak about the city and its artistic, significance, it's almost like you're speaking Mandarin to the person. Mm-hmm. And
it's the misinformation. Mm-hmm. It's like when you don't have the right information, you state based on wrong information.
Yeah.
And
it's not even wrong. It's just, again, you don't know. And it's like, I've looked at a lot of history of African-American art books. If I had to do a count of how many artists who are from Detroit who are featured in most of these books, you'll see Al Loving, you'll see Huey Lee Smith, you may see Charles McGee, you may see Shirley Woodson. But again, like with Al Loving is from Detroit, and like a MacArthur Binion, both are from Detroit, but they moved out to New York. So in the minds of whoever is documenting, well, they're a New York artist, they're not a Detroit artist. Mm. They're from Detroit, they got their education in Detroit, albeit their careers, are part of that New York dynamic. It's like saying Michael Jackson is not from Gary, Indiana. It's like he's still from Gary, Indiana. He is an Indiana native. He's just shared with the world. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with these artists. Like, just because I choose to live in Detroit does not mean that my work does not travel around the world. Mm. So yes, in the eyes of someone who says, well, you're a local artist, it's like, look, someone in New York is also considered a local artist. Quiet is kept. If you look at what's most of the works on the walls of MoMA or the Met, you might as well call it a local art gallery, because it's mostly New York artists who are being highlighted when you're talking about modern contemporary art. Mm-hmm. So who's to say what's local and what's not? Who's to say how their reach is? I can pull up information on Ernest Hartman and see how far his work went. His work was exhibited, and bought in London, in mm-hmm. Ghana, but again, if you don't know, yeah.
I think the important thing, it's like, I think about this sometimes. I'm like, if you could literally track history mm-hmm. about your great, 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 great mm-hmm. grandfather, what he ate, what he consumed, mm-hmm. what were his habits, it's going to tell a story to you, because generationally, it's going to impact you. Yeah. So it's like, without that information, you cannot experience the most out of your current situation, mm-hmm. because a lot of times people are trying to figure stuff out
Yeah.
You know, they just don't know.
Like, imagine if you found out, like let's say a relative of yours, or maybe someone that was connected to you, like, 100 years ago or whatnot, was one of the first recipients of a major award, and you're like, or maybe they were, a part of the abolitionist movement, like the Underground Railroad. Something about that just gives you a sense of pride where you're like, man, now imagine a young artist who didn't know that there was a strong history of Black artists in the city of Detroit. And then comes to find out that, no, it wasn't just individuals. There were groups, there were galleries. Some of the oldest Black-owned galleries were founded in Detroit. That's not just a Detroit story. That's an American story. So it becomes now when you start to bring this to the table and it's all under one space, because again, if you were to do a Google search on Ernest Hartman, very little is going to come up. If you were to do a search on the figure J. Edward Bailey, who was the first Black photographer to have a solo exhibition in a major museum in the United States, and this was at the DIA in 1969. We don't know these stories. We just, I had to literally go to library, go to the Bentley Library at the University of Michigan or the Reuther Library at Wayne State to find out some of this information, dive deep on YouTube and find these, videos that only have 200 views, but you're like, wow, this has information that I'm looking for. So it's, I guess I just look at it where it's like, if you're willing to do the research and bring all of it to the forefront, I believe you are doing the work of, that God is asking you to do, so I'm enjoying it.
What's the message that you hope for not only Detroiters, not only artists, but anyone around the world that interacts with your work to receive?
That is, I think at the end of the day, I hope that when people look at anything that I do, that they feel, I guess the best way to call it is feeling a sense of pride or upliftment. I never want someone to look at what I do and say, I wish I didn't look at that. I would rather they leave feeling a little bit more fulfilled. And it's funny, I was asked, this was actually a couple of days ago, about my approach in creating. And I say that some people have an approach to say that if they want to create something that's going to resonate, they go based off emotions. And how you go about that, is really depending on what your motive is. Now, if your motivation is money, you may play with the emotional strings with a person to more so benefit to say, buy this product or buy that product. I go into any piece understanding that it is not about selling the piece. So making sure that the piece can travel. So that's why I love social media in that respect, that it can get you in front of the eyes of someone who's over in Ghana or the Ivory Coast or Rome or Tokyo, further than I can get on a plane and go there and show it to that person, right then and there. So having work that has traveled and seen places that I haven't seen personally yet is a blessing. And the response that I've normally gotten from most is, man, your work spoke to me in a way that really just touched me. So I think one of the best things that I heard about my work was, it was actually from this older woman who was saying how she spent hours looking at my work and just saw the spirit of the person that I was depicting and could feel their story, could understand their story. And what you were saying through that touched me to a point where I wanted to do a little bit more, to touch others. So when you get that type of response, it's like, yeah, you just want to keep doing it.
It's huge. I think that is the underlying message that authentic, real creators want to achieve is what your work does for others.
Yeah.
That is the huge part, because I think that when we're able to reflect back and we're able to see like, man, we got so much out there. We don't know in the moment when we're creating it or when we first publish it or when we first share it, how it's going to impact certain people and in what way. And then also there's going to be whole new generations 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now that are experiencing it for the first time. And it's going to touch them in a maybe different way, So I think that as a creative, it's super exciting to be able to be present with that feeling of knowing that, just like we were saying earlier, instantaneous is not the goal.
Yeah.
The goal is to impact, and it could be a decade or a century from now.
Yeah.
But eventually it will happen.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
Well, James, thank you so much for your time, your talent, your creativity. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome. Very awesome.